The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. At the sight of the crowds, Jesus' heart was moved with pity for them because they were troubled and abandoned like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is abundant, but the laborers are few. So ask the master of the harvest to send out laborers for the harvest." Then he summoned his 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits to drive them out and to cure every disease and every illness. The names of the 12 apostles are these. First, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John. Philip and Bartholomew. Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector. James, the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus. Simon from Cana, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Jesus sent out these 12 after instructing them thus: "Do not go into pagan territory or enter a Samaritan town. Go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. As you go, make this proclamation: the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Cure the sick, raise the dead, cleanse lepers, drive out demons. Without cost you have received. Without cost you are to give." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
I have a graduation party to go to after Mass. And I'm sure all of you have plenty of graduation parties this time of the year. I was thinking back to when I was in Japan, and I know all of you know that I've been in Japan for many years. In Japan, they don't celebrate graduations from school. They celebrate when you get into school. So if you applied for a very special elementary school and you got in, there's no party, but everybody congratulates you. And when you apply for a very special high school that you want to go to and you get in, everybody congratulates you. And then if you apply for a special university or college and you get in, everybody congratulates you. And then if you get out of college and you apply for a job with the company that you want to work for, and you get the job, everybody congratulates you. So it's not about the end, the graduation. It's about the next step in your life. The next step that you're called not to just go to school and finish school, but that you're called to something else afterwards. And that's what Jesus is telling us in today's gospel. He calls his disciples, and he calls them the first time in today's gospel, the apostles. And he names them for us. And he calls them, they've been following him now for some time. They've been following him, walking around, listening to what he had to say, watching him perform miracles, etc., etc. Now he says, now it's your turn. It doesn't just end by listening to me, but you're called to go and do more. Do what I've been telling you about for the past however many months or years it's been. And that's what Jesus is calling us as well. I always remember there was a young man in Japan, and he would say, I got to go to Mass this weekend. I got to get that final blessing. And I don't know how many of us think about getting the final blessing. We come to church for whatever. We come to church to receive communion. He came to get the final blessing because he knew that he had to go out afterwards. And at the end of, at the end of Mass, when the priest blesses us, it's time for us to take what we just heard, what we just received at church, and take it out to our lives, to our world, to our families, to our neighborhood. I just got back from Brazil. I was there for a week-long meeting. Have you ever been to Brazil? Have you ever been to Sao Paulo? 22 million people. and there's no expressways in the city. It's all streets. It's chaos. Anyways, one day in the morning, rather than continue our meeting, we went to a small parish in the city and had Mass. It was the Feast of Body and Blood of Christ, and so we went there for Mass. And then I heard the story afterwards of this small parish. About 15 years ago, one of the Pine priests, the Pine religious group that I belong to, he was the treasurer for our order in Brazil, so that was a full-time job. And somehow he was led to or discovered this abandoned chapel in this one poorer area of town. So he went there and he tried to discover what the history behind it and why it was abandoned. And some people obviously showed up. They showed some interest in him, and he showed some interest in them. And eventually he got it cleaned up. He started having Mass there on weekends with the permission of the bishop, of course. Eventually he was named the administrator, then he was named the pastor, and the place is a fully running parish now. It had been abandoned. It had been, dirty and not used for a number of years. But somehow he got the call. We never know where the Spirit is going to lead us. We don't know what we're called to do. We don't know what it is that God wants us to do. We hear in today's readings, "You are my special possession." Moses didn't know what it was that God wanted him to do, but he learned to trust. We don't know, even no matter what stage we are in our lives. If we're recent graduates, if we're in midlife, even if we're past midlife, God is calling us. He's calling us never to give up, always to get that final blessing at Mass and take it beyond, take it out. This is what we call being a missionary. And not just being a missionary in some foreign country. You don't have to necessarily go to Brazil or wherever, or Japan or wherever it may be. We're called also to be missionaries in our own families, in our own neighborhoods, in our own workplaces, in our own schools. We get the blessing at the end of Mass, not as an end, but as a beginning.